Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the March meeting of the Pine Bush Preserve Commission. Start off with some introductions. To my far right, a new face at the table is Mike McLaughlin with the County of Albany. Welcome, Mike. It's good to have you with us. Of course, Chris Hauber, Elaine Ball-Chenian, Tony Wilkinson. Sorry, I called you Harvey. I do that all the time. Tony Wilkinson, Steve Rice, Nancy Pearson, Mike Lyons, Rick Georgeson, Don Sapos, John Brust, and the esteemed Larry Eckhouse.
I was so bad for
Sorry. Once one of my, I guess, one of those fractures in my mind. Have we, has everyone had a chance to consider the minutes from the previous meeting? Is there any need for change or correction? If not, we can consider their adoption. All in favor of adopting the meetings from the December meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Okay, they're adopted unanimously. I see we have some members of the public here today. Is there anyone who wishes to offer any comments or questions or statements or anything?
Hi, my name is Helen Romano, and I actually live in the Pine Bush. And I'd like to commend you guys for the great job you've been doing, and I'd like to see it obviously continue.
Thank you, Helen.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right,
Yes.
I make a motion we adjourn.
I'm Tom Romano, this is my wife Helen, and I'd like to echo what Helen said. We've lived in the Pine Bush for over 40 years, and we've seen some changes, and at this point the changes have been very positive. Last summer, the first time where we lived, which is towards the northwest corner of the recommended area for full protection on Kings Road, I saw turtles for the first time. And these were good-sized turtles. I don't know the scientific name for them, but they had black shells with their neck had a yellow stripe on it. I've seen an increase of frogs, and there were years where I went by mowing my backyard where I never saw a frog at all. There's been a tremendous increase in frogs in the population, plus an increase in snakes. We've seen a lot of snakes. So I think the preservation efforts are paying off in a lot of ways, and it's noted and appreciated. And also, this may be on your jurisdiction, but I'd love to see some linkage with the Woodlawn Preserve. My wife and I did walk the preserve, and it's a small gem. It'd be great if we included it. I do remember when I first moved here that this area was patrolled by a conservation officer on horseback. So things have changed, and once again, continued good luck. One further thing, it's great what you guys did, cutting the trees along the right-of-ways. You can actually look into the Pine Bush. You can't see the dunes, you can't see the hills. And I think it was a very good plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the comments. You mentioned turtles, and there's a lot of research going on. Some of it being done by preserve staff, some of it being done by DEC staff, a lot of it being done collaboratively between the two staffs. And some of the stuff that they're doing is particularly interesting. And with respect to turtles, we heard a presentation a few meetings ago from Carl Parker from the DEC, who's been working very closely with commission staff with tracking turtles within the Pine Bush, and it's exciting to see. There are some really interesting things going on with turtles, and we're learning a lot more about their behavior than we ever knew before too. So it's exciting, and you're right. A lot of the stewardship work that's been done over the last several years has really paid off, and we're hoping that we continue to have public support for the stewardship work that we want to do in the future as well. So thank you. We appreciate your comments. Any other comments from anyone in the public? Okay. On to reports. I've got a couple of items. The first one I'll mention is perhaps some people lately have noticed the prevalence of landfill odors from the Albany landfill. I've certainly noticed it. If you've driven by the landfill at the right time of the month or based on the weather conditions, it's been unmistakable. We're aware of it. We're working with the city and with their consultants to try to address it. The problem seems to be stemming from the fact that there's been so much melting and precipitation that's running into the landfill gas collection system that it's actually interfering with the gas collection system's ability to siphon off gas from the landfill. It's a problem that they're working on, and we're hopeful that they're going to be able to address in the near future. But we are working with the city and their consultant to try to get it addressed as quickly as we can. The other thing I wanted to mention, and perhaps Chris will chime in with greater detail if he has it. I understand that the City of Albany has concluded their bid solicitation process for the landfill habitat restoration project, and they have decided to rehire AES, which is the consultant that they've been using for the past few years. And so that's good news, I think, because it will give greater continuity to the effort to progress the landfill habitat restoration project for the next several years and continuing on past the point where the landfill actually closes. So is there anything else you want to offer on that, Chris?
No, the only thing I can say is Neil attends weekly meetings with the consultants, the city's consultants, city employees, and DEC staff, primarily Carl Parker from DEC. And they had a meeting, they met yesterday to kind of look forward what's going to happen on the ground as far as the restoration work and continued habitat work on the preserve lands adjacent to the landfill, beside the former trailer park. So they're kind of planning ahead, like what are we going to do? What is the first steps we're working on this spring? So it's in process, and it's good to have AES that they decided to rebid on the project. So they're the ones who originally wrote the plan.
Thanks. Any other reports from commission members? If not, we'll turn it over to Chris.
Okay. I have a few things. This is a one-page worksheet that is put together, Tony, you've seen this, by the New York State Government Relations for Nature Conservancy. She's one of the co-leads of the New York Environmental Coalition. So as you know, we're in the midst of budget negotiations for the state of New York. The end of the fiscal year is the 31st of March. So a new budget is due by that date. The executive came out with his budget, I believe it's the 20th or 21st of January, and part of that includes the Environmental Protection Fund. So the executive proposed the Environmental Protection Fund at $157 million, which is $4 million up from last year. And we worked with our partners in both the Assembly and the Senate to talk about a potential for an increase for our appropriation. And that's based on being level, having level funding, which is fortunate, but all the things that we're doing continue to cost more. So the request was, if it's possible, if the EPF were to increase, please consider an increase from the Pine Bush Commission. And the Assembly passed their budget bill last Wednesday. You can see that. That's the third column in. They increased the overall EPF by $10 million to $167 million, and increased the proposal for the Commission's appropriate by $250,000. And if you look at the final column on the right, the Senate's budget bill that came out late Friday night last week does not include any increases in any line in the EPF, including the Pine Bush, but it doesn't cut either. But it adds a new line for municipal water infrastructure, which is not cash, it's bonded capital from Superfund money. So it looks like their EPF, the Senate's EPF, went to $200 million, when in fact it's basically the same as the executives. So conversations continue, budget committees continue, and my expectation is that we probably won't see a final budget until maybe Thursday of next week, I would guess. And probably one of the key things, and I'm looking at Tony for the Nature Conservancy, as well as us, as far as land acquisition goes, the only addition to land acquisition that was included is the Assembly. The Assembly added an additional $1 million to land acquisition, but specifically only in regions 1 through 3 in DEC, which was a disappointment for a number of environmental groups across the state that focus on conservation through land acquisition. So that's just a summary of where we are. I can give a brief update on the vision strategy that we've been doing too. We have, as you know, we have a Discovery Center committee chaired by Steve, and then also including John and Don and Harvey Alexander, the 4 members of this board that are on that committee. They participated in a vision strategy, which is a strategic planning process for the Discovery Center for the next 5+ years. We held that, we had a full day meeting with all staff and that committee, as well as Elaine joined us. Thanks for coming, Elaine, and Jean. And I would say it was a very productive day. We came out with a solid strategic focus for going ahead. We'll have a final report from the consultant by the end of this month, and I'll distribute that to everybody here. And if you have questions, you can call me or you can call Jeff. The basic focus is that, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, is that number one, the Discovery Center is an interpretive center for the Albany Pine Bush Preserve, which is a globally rare habitat, one of the most unique areas, certainly in the Northeast, and therefore the Discovery Center is one of a kind. It's not a nature center like Five Rivers or other places or Emmett Treadwell. It's very, very specific, and because of that, we have a very specific focus, and that's the mission of the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. So I'll leave that as just kind of wrapped up in a nutshell. Does anybody on the committee want to add to that? No?
Well, I would say that the board will see and probably can scrutinize all the actions that we do going forward to make sure that we are consistent with what you just said.
Yep.
That we are an interpretive center for one of a kind place. And I think it gives the staff here a good sense of priorities. And I'll tell you what, I learned a lot about this place through this process, and I encourage anybody to read the materials that come through, and then we'll have some sort of presentation to the board.
I was going to follow up on that. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a great process to go through.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just compliment Chris for spearheading this, because you know, it requires a certain amount of risk-taking to do this, because it potentially challenges the status quo, and I think that's exactly what was needed, because in order for a commission to remain vibrant and vital, I think you have to reevaluate where you are and where you want to be every so often. So I want to compliment you, Chris, and compliment everyone on the staff who participated, because I know that it was an extremely valuable opportunity to go through. So thanks.
Great. And just, you know, to kind of back that up, I know everybody here had a conversation, I hope, with a consultant. The consultant did 51 interviews, either through individual phone conversations or through focus groups, to start her analysis, and then, you know, brought that information for the conversation that we had for the full day planning session with the staff. So where do we go from here? The next step is we're going to do some operational planning. We're going to bring that consultant back in for a half day with the staff and say, all right, here's the big picture, here's the strategy, the strategic focus that we have. Let's put it into a matrix for actual tactics. How do we do that? And then there's going to be another follow-up half day with the manager's team here on our staff to get into the nitty-gritty and say, all right, this is how we're going to implement it. And from there, follow up on what you said, John, then we can make sure that we're on track, and we'll have a full presentation in June when we have it all done. Okay? All right, I got to speed up. Just quickly, following up on, I think in December and September, I said that, actually it was in September, that we as a staff are going to be focusing more on doing some individual training. And part of that we're continuing on. I attended the Supervisory Institute, which is 2 full days, hosted by DEC in the central office for people around the state, and all the managers, the people on our managers team here will be going through that too. That was good. And we did an all-day staff training for communications and personality traits, which was fun. Personality evaluations are always a good time. So we did that 2 weeks ago today. All staff did that, and I think that was well received. You can look back at the staff. And then 2 final things. I sent this board packet because Margie was out. So I sent this board packet out electronically. How did that work for everybody? Is that good?
Worked out good, but for some reason, when I printed it out,
Yeah.
it was kind of like a little blurry, almost like it wasn't flat on the screen. Or as it went through the feeder, it wasn't.
Yeah, that's probably the way I scan.
Okay.
Well, Mike, the one thing about Margie being out is it reinforced the critical role that she plays around here.
Well, actually, it reinforced 2 things.
Yes, it did. That Margaret is a critical role, and plays a very critical role here. We don't want Chris doing this again. So frankly, when Margie puts this package together, she puts it together as an electronic PDF. So when you print it out, it'll be crystal clear. I don't know how to do that. So I scanned it. So if it's okay, I'd like to try and continue to eliminate paper.
Yes.
At least it wasn't drawn in crayon.
Which is a potential, right?
Chris,
And-
I just have one question.
Yeah.
I know we don't have action items on this agenda.
That's right.
But, typically on action items, we have, the different greens, pinks, blue papers.
Yeah.
How would we be able to, are you just going to do action item A and you don't worry about color?
We can do that, can't we, Margie?
Or can there just be like, instead of a whole band, a whole page of color, maybe just a.
We'll try it. We'll see how it works. I think we can do that.
Yeah, I'm not looking to have the whole, print out color or print out black and white, the whole page and come out shaded, but maybe just. Would ask my, we don't do this kind of color.
Okay. And then one final thing, please look at the update in your board packet, all the things that the staff have been doing for the last quarter. And I'll just point to one section on hydrology work. As a follow-up to the hydrology study that we did over a year ago, one of the recommendations was to install piezometers, which are shallow wells, narrow shallow wells. And we've put in several of those, and we're going to be putting in more once our budget is in place. After the state approves the budget. And that's where Neil is today. He is out with a hydrology company getting standard tests of the water table. So those will be used in addition to the ones that already existed for the city. So we'll get a better idea of the overall water table and how it fluctuates. And I'm done.
Okay, so as Chris mentioned, Neil is out. So that means Chris is actually not done. He's going to do the technical committee and project review.
Oh yes, I am. So you get to hear me more. Oh, thanks, Marty. Okay, so we still continue to work with the landfill. Not a whole lot has been done. We are working with both DEC and the city to issue the new temporary revocable permit that we issue for their work to do habitat work on preserved lands for 2014. And like I said, Neil is involved in the process and we continue to monitor it. Number 2 on the back is the Rack Road Community Historic District. This is part of the Promised Land. It's one of the exhibits in the Discovery Center from the African American community that migrated here from Shibuya, Mississippi in the 40s. We were approached to see if we would be interested in buying historic structures, and we are not in a position to do that, but we would support anything that they can do because it does fit in with the history of the preserve. So that's basically what the technical committee said. Crossgates Commons out parcel, that's actually wrong. That's not Crossgates Commons, that's Crossgates. Is that right, Don?
No, it's the Commons.
It is the Commons?
Yeah, it's in Albany.
Oh, yeah, it is, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the other one. I'm thinking of the expansion. Crossgates Commons is where Walmart and Home Depot are when you drive on Washington Avenue Extension. You can see that they're building a structure there now. It's a fast food drive-through restaurant. They worked with us for lighting issues. Technical committee always recommends the use of high-pressure sodium lights to either eliminate or minimize impacts on nocturnal insects. We found out through some research that LEDs have even less impact.
Oh, good.
So, yes. So they will be using LEDs. So the benefit to LEDs are, as you know, they last a long time and they're much more environmentally friendly. So that's a good thing. So that's something new we learned.
Is the identity of that business a mystery?
It's McDonald's.
It's a McDonald's.
Great.
It's either that or
I asked for an
Dunkin'
In-N-Out.
Donuts. One of the other.
In-N-Out would be great.
Yeah, no.
Fortunately, it'd be the only one east of the Mississippi.
Maybe a Sonic.
Yeah.
The town of Guilderland, the three under the town of Guilderland, I'm going to jump to number 2 and 3, and then talk about number 1. Crossgates expansion, that's basically, that has no impact. That's most of the expansion is within the existing facility, but it is all on the existing footprint of the parking lot. Is that a quick basic summary, Don?
That's correct.
And the Guilderland Fire District, they were doing some improvements on an emergency services building, and the only thing that we recommended is that they use native plants and landscaping, and that project was approved. So the only one real project that we spent a lot of time on, or we spent some focus on, is an area that's in full protection, in Area 3. It's down near the corner of 155 down this road and Route 20 western. So that's an area recommended for full protection. So a developer approached the technical committee, and they're considering putting in a senior living and adult learning center. So the technical committee reviewed the plans, had a conversation with the consultant and the developer, provided some feedback, and the developer took that feedback and is now considering whether or not to approach the town with an application. But that feedback included, the result of that feedback is that there would be a significant set aside for that problem if they were to go forward. Any questions?
Okay, thanks, Chris. Next, we have Jeff with a report on the Discovery Center.
Good morning. The Discovery Center hosted the second annual gathering of Nature Center administrators meetings in February. This was a statewide group under the auspices of the National Association of Nature Center Administrators, and it was very successful. Attendees commented on how impressed they were with the professionalism of our staff and the meeting arrangements, as well as the top-notch quality of the Discovery Center itself, and the general caliber of our programs. People really came away very impressed, and I got handwritten notes and emails and a lot of comments at the meeting, so it was great. The Discovery Center vision strategy has been a major focus of my time, of course. As Chris reported, it's scheduled for, we'll have something in April. Chris already thanked the vision strategy team. We're going to be reporting more in the summer, at the summer meeting, but I wanted to thank all the staff, and especially Aaron Keinel and Wendy Craney for serving on the vision strategy team and all their hard work too. Just want to recognize them. We continue our efforts on greening the Discovery Center and our programs and operations, working with our property manager, with NYSERDA on numerous energy efficiency upgrades. We also launched an office composting program, and these are all part of our initiative to institute best practices in environmental sustainability and to be a model eco-friendly business in the community. We filled our new part-time position for the front desk Discovery Shop attendant in January, and we welcomed Scovia Herrero, who is not here. She's part-time, so she works weekends and Mondays. In terms of outreach, we're featured in the Albany County Convention and Visitors Bureau Guide again. There are 125,000 guides distributed, and there are 25,000 online requests, and 35,000 some other conventions online. I don't remember. I didn't write it down. We continue to showcase at numerous events throughout the region, reaching thousands. We've got numerous print, radio, and TV ads in various stages, as well as planning for our own events like Earth Day in April and Migration Celebration in May, and also Lupin Fest in May. In terms of education, in the first 2 months of this year, over 800 people participated in public programs. We had great success with Star Lab, a portable inflatable planetarium here from the Dudley Observatory in my side. That was a great program that we did upstairs in our large conference room up there. We've also been out on the road bringing programs to several schools in the area, as well as running our winter Pine Bush Pups programs. And finally, our education internship program continues with our spring intern, Julia Craig. Julia's not here. That is my report. Any questions?
Jeff, I know this Pine Bush Post is going around, and I know that you and Wendy are prime movers in it, and just want to say it looks extremely professional and very well laid out. Nice work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to Lisa for the financial report.
Good morning. The first report in our financial packet will be the statement of financial activities. And this will give us our year-to-date figures through January 31st, 2014. First, on a revenue side, dues and contributions are slightly higher than budget, and this is due to increased donations specifically from the Friends Group and a foundation, and in general, donations are up also. Grant income is 90% of our budget through January, and this is due to the timing of expenses. We will maximize our appropriation for this fiscal year. Mitigation fees are at 130% of budget, and this is due to increase mitigation fees from the landfill for the first 3 quarters. Lease revenue is higher than budget due to rental income from our seasonal staff at the Barron's House. And other revenue is higher than budget due to increase in the continued efforts of the education and Discovery Center staff and everybody here. Merchandise sales are up and program fees are up. So we're up almost $10,000. Total revenue came in at 97% of budget for the month of January, and we will end up slightly higher than budget for this fiscal year at approximately 105%. Moving on to expenses, personnel and fringe are slightly under budget, and this is due to the timing of benefit payments and merit and step increases that are built in for the fiscal year. Travel and training is at 73% of budget, and this is due to both the timing of expenses and a few seminars that we canceled this year that we did not attend. Contractual, we're at 66% of our budget, and this is due to mainly in the Discovery Center and weather and some projects that we did not do for the year. Communications is under budget due to the timing of advertising and printing. This will end up slightly under budget for the year also. Occupancy is under budget, and this is due to savings in our both our electric services, our electric delivery services, and our gas services throughout the year. Supplies and equipment are under budget, and we should come in pretty close to budget at the end of the year. Other expenses are slightly under budget and due to just a slight variance in administrative expenses and dues and fees. So our total expenses came in 81% of our budget. Overall, our revenue came in at 97%, giving us a higher net income than budget of $359,000. Anybody have any questions on that?
Project that to be about 100% at fiscal year's end? Or to be under?
Revenue is going to come in probably about 105% over. Expenses will come in maybe around 90% under, so we'll be higher. So, any other questions on that? Okay. Moving on to statement of net assets. Looking at our asset side, our operating cash increased slightly, and this is just due to conservative spending and the timing of expenses and funds. Conservation and land reserves decreased $576,000, and this was due to a transfer of cash to our reserve account. Grant funds, grant receivable, our grant funds due from DEC, and these were paid. Accounts receivable was money owed for quarterly mitigation, and this also has been paid. Inventory decreased slightly from last year. And prepaid expenses decreased due to the timing of year-end expenditures that fall into our next fiscal year. Investments increased, and backing up the $576,000, we still had a positive performance from the beginning of our fiscal year of $91,000. Capital assets increased slightly due to recent investments in capital. So total assets increased $461,000 over last year, and this is due to mainly an increase in cash and investments both. Moving on to liabilities, accounts payable and accrued expenses are slightly lower, and this is just due to monthly and annual accruals, and this will vary. Deferred revenue increased slightly due to increased funds from National Grid, and total liabilities increased slightly from last year due to deferred revenue. Net assets, our investment and capital assets increased slightly due to recent purchases. Reserved assets remained unchanged, and unreserved assets increased $398,000. Overall, our total net assets increased $450,000 due to a positive NOI and an increase in our investment income. Any questions?
You might have explained it, I was thinking of something else. The conservation land reserves, what's the $550,000 difference there between your...
That's the money we transferred into the reserve account, Yep, our investment account. Final report is our investment summary. The reserve fund is down 4.85% for the year, and this is due to outflows from the bond market. And both the Discovery Center endowment and endowment have a positive performance, coming in at 6.17% and a 7.16% gain through the month of January. So overall, our investments had a positive performance with a gain of $91,000 through January. Any questions on that? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, we have three presentation and discussion topics. The first being the annual report on investments from KeyBank. I know Cindy and Mike are here.
So you want to do that nicely.
Look at you. I'll introduce myself. My name is Cindy Garford, and I am the relationship manager on the Albany Pine Bush Preserve. My role is really to coordinate the relationship with Key. So I am the go-to person. I keep on saying to Chris, if something happens within Key, I want to know first. I don't want you going through the web and finding out who to go to. So I really coordinate the relationship. Mike manages the investments on the portfolio side, so that's really what he's going to talk about today. We want to thank you. I mean, we've had 5 years on Albany Pine Bush. It's been a wonderful relationship for us, and we hope the same for you. We look every time to see what more we could be doing for you, and we're always coming, when we meet on an annual basis to be proactive. But if there's something more we should be doing, let us know. We're always going to come with suggestions, but if there's something you need from Key, ask us. We're going to always willing to put out flyers every year as you guys start to begin, and we're always willing to do that. Anything you want us to get out there, because we have a large circulation area, branches. And I know I would go down to Hudson, I see him in the Hudson office. I live in Columbia County. I've been up here, my children have been up here, my grandchild's been up here. And I got to tell you, if I hadn't been involved with this, I would have never known about you guys. I live south. You don't think of coming here, but what a great gem it really is. So I want to thank you personally, because it really has educated me and my family. But I think even to some of our branches, they don't realize what's available. And to your point, my son snowshoes this year. He got snowshoes at LOB, and they brought him up here to snowshoe. So I don't know that relationship you would have with LOB, but that is really wonderful, because that was a big thing this year for people. They retired in the winter, and they went snowshoe. So this was a great place to do it. So he'll be back again on his own. So I think it's wonderful. So I really want to thank you for what you do, and I'm not even living in Albany. So I'll get this so that Mike can continue on, but I really appreciate the relationship.
Thanks. Thanks. Great.
The date ignored girl who did it is off today. She really thought that today was Friday.
That's okay.
We all love Friday, so. She said, should I change the date?
No.
As Cindy mentioned, my name is Mike Duran. I'm a portfolio manager with the private bank. It's my role to monitor the investments and work with the finance committee and with the board as a whole to kind of oversee the assets. A couple things I wanted to point out. I thought, there's nothing worse than hearing someone read a PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do is really kind of give you kind of an overview and a recap of the information that's contained herein. I did want to point out, though, right now we're in the process of going over a huge systems overhaul internally at Key. So the format you see today is sort of been kind of pulled together. The next time we get together, it's going to look a little different, but the performance numbers that are indicated in the presentation are actually as of 12/31. I know Lisa's numbers were through January 31, so they may not jive, but I just wanted to point that out. Secondly, again, I'm going to give a brief recap, but I also wanted to point out, I wanted to commend the Finance Committee on a couple of points. Listening to the meeting as it's progressed so far, one of the major things that kind of oversees investment strategy and investment from a fiduciary standpoint is having an investment policy statement. And that really dictates kind of the marching orders for any manager. And it kind of sets the guidelines and the rules of engagement so that we know what we're being measured against, and also provides a layer of protection for the entity and the board as a whole. The Finance Committee has been great about getting together and reviewing that on a regular basis and kind of conferring with us as to what may be appropriate. And then that's very important, so I did want to commend them on that very much so. Secondly, and I'll sort of cover this in my brief recap, Lisa mentioned it, the quick phrase, outflows of the bond market. So last year, in the fixed income world, in the investment side, in May, we had a kind of a blip where there was an announcement made by the Fed stating that the quantitative easing, the bond buying program that was sort of propping up the cash flow in the bond market, was going to end. The reaction from the free world was, well, we need to sell all of our bonds quickly and no longer own them. The bond market fell off precipitously, which you never look for in a bond environment. Bonds are meant to be the stable kind of cornerstone of any portfolio. So this sort of took everyone by surprise. To the credit of the Finance Committee, within weeks, Lisa was on the phone with me, not in an antagonistic manner, but just saying, would you be able to come in and sit down with us to just kind of recap and go over things that are going on? And I'll be honest, I didn't get that call from a lot of clients, but I made those calls. I thought it was very astute of the committee to say, we just want to be aware of what's happening. So we actually had an interim meeting in August in here and just sort of went over what was happening and what was going on, and reestablished the fact that the investment strategy that had been employed for the reserve fund, which was sort of the more impacted portfolio of the two, the investment strategy that's in place there is appropriate, and that activity wasn't something that was foreseeable or negligent or anything like that. It was just something that occurred, and we sort of put a plan together to kind of get around that and get through it. So I just wanted to commend again the committee on sort of their effort in reaching out to me as a portfolio manager and Key overall, just to kind of review things and get a feel for what was happening to the benefit of the organization as a whole. So I just wanted to point that out before I went any further. The numbers in here, again, there's a lot of data, and I make even more notes, so the last thing you want to do is hear me for 20 minutes talk about investments. However, if you take a look at the first tab 1 is the endowment fund. And I will say also, just in brief, that I don't have a copy of the IPS, the investment policy statement, in here, but that is available, obviously, to you and to the public. All of the investments within the portfolios, all of them are in line with the investment strategy as outlined by the IPS, so there's nothing that is sort of over or underweighted that it shouldn't be. But I did not have that item in here. The endowment fund, if you flip to the third page, and again, no page numbers on this sort of jerry-rigged performance presentation, I apologize. If you flip to the fourth page in there, that's actually the performance analysis page. So and it looks like this for the committee members, it looks like this, minus all the scribble. You can see the total account performance for the endowment fund for year 2013 was up 16.18%. That's broken out by an equity performance of roughly 29%. Obviously, the perfect storm last year for equity. The market was up tremendously, all aspects, with the exception of emerging markets. But for the most part, the market was up as a whole. Equities up 29. The bond market in the portfolio we're looking at was down 1.27 for the year, versus the benchmark that's actually outperformance. The benchmark, as outlined by the IPS, is the Barclays Aggregate Index. That was down 2%. So from a defensive standpoint, the bonds actually did what they were supposed to do, which was be down less than the index. So a negative performance of 1.27 on the fixed income portion, but it's a smaller weight. The larger weight is the equities, because the objective overall is one of growth versus income. So the total portfolio for the year, 16.18%. And again, all the investments and all the underlying holdings are in line with the investment policy statement. A little bit different picture on the second tab, and that is the endowment fund, the reserve fund, pardon me. So as Lisa had mentioned in her financial reports, there was a cash outflow from, I believe, the cash side into the reserve fund of $500,000. And the goal there was to take funds that were producing, again, even as a bank, we all know interest rates are very, very low. So the banking environment is not paying out a lot of income right now. So the idea and the objective from the Finance Committee standpoint was, let's move funds that are sitting and not really gaining a lot of interest. Let's move them to the investment side, where at the time the investment of strategy in that portfolio, which was Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, or TIPS, had been performing at a tremendous rate for the 4.5 years we've been doing business. And they had been generating a lot of income to the tune of like 3.5% to 4%. So the idea was, let's move some non-producing funds over to a producing fund. We did that in the second week of May. Well, the fourth week of May is when the announcement of the Fed and all the bond market sort of took a tumble. So the timing of it caused the performance numbers for the year to actually be down for 2013 about 6% from an actual value standpoint. What I will point out, though, is that those assets actually came in and were generating income as well. So the overall net value did increase. I think right now the actual value as of yesterday's close for the reserve fund is $1.373 million, which is still, again, up from the initial deposit. So technically, it officially would have done, it did better than it would have on the banking side. It just didn't look good from a timing standpoint. But as we discussed at the Finance Committee, the idea, the goal, and the move was completely appropriate and correct. It just happened to be 2 weeks too early. But I commend them on at least looking at that and realizing there's a better use of the funds. The last tab is the Discovery Center. And again, the Discovery Center, it's a smaller size portfolio, so we utilize a lot of mutual funds and iShares in there as opposed to individual securities. But as well, the third page there will give you an idea of the performance. That fund also performed at 13% positive for last year, but roughly 25 and change on the equity side, negative 1.8 on the fixed income side. And again, these numbers are only through 12/31. So January was a very tough month for the equity markets. February was a very good month. We're basically flat for the year, or a little bit up. But again, meeting with the Finance Committee and kind of... Oh, she did. Oh, okay, in the new books, my apologies. Okay, I still have my old book from last week. So you've got the numbers through January. So right now, the outlook, as discussed with the committee last week, is that we still like equities more than fixed income. There's no need or no reason to look at the investment strategy that's being employed and make any major overhaul or changes. We're pretty good about getting together on a regular basis and discussing if the outlook looks different, if there's a reason to make a change. At this point, I can't foresee any major changes. The only one may be that from an investment standpoint, we may be increasing our exposure to the international developed area. Not a major change. It won't appear as a big change to the portfolio. It would be sort of an inside the portfolio maneuver where we may reduce small cap by a few percent and increase the international developed by a few percent. The small cap area has done very, very well over the last 24 to 36 months, so the weighting of that is slightly up. We're happy to take a little money off the table and redeploy in an area that we think offers a better upside, which would be the international developed market. We also have exposure in the portfolio to emerging markets. Any hallmark of a good risk-adjusted portfolio is that you want to have multiple asset classes of investment within. If you focus on any one area too much, you run the risk of performing very well when things are great, but when things are not doing very well, you also run the risk of riding that down as well. So we like to reduce the overall risk by sort of spreading out the investment strategy across multiple asset classes. As of right now, I don't foresee any major changes, though, to the investment strategy going forward. I'd be happy to take any questions or comments or concerns from anyone.
I would just like to say thank you to both of you, Cindy and Mike. You've been so responsive, excellent customer service. It's really great to work with all of you.
Oh, thank you. And I think I can speak for Cindy as well when I say we enjoy working with the committee and the board, and we understand the value of what these investment dollars are for. This isn't just numbers on a page. These are things that the board and the group and the organization utilizes for everything that's been discussed here so far this morning, especially hearing from people who come in and say we appreciate everything that's being done. We know that that's sort of what the impetus is behind these assets. We take that responsibility seriously. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Great.
Just so people know, that's okay.
Thank you.
Mike and Cindy come in, and when they come in, they'll spend over an hour with the audit committee, and they'll go through things in detail. And then we basically get the overview. So if you ever want more detail, you can always call me or Lisa or anybody on the audit committee. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. And the investment policy statement that Mike mentioned, if anybody wants to see that, everybody should have it when we originally adopted it. We updated it
Last year.
last year. Was it 13? Okay. March, it was actually March of 13. So, but if you want a copy of that, we can use that.
Thanks again, Mike and Cindy, we appreciate it. Next, we'll move to a presentation by Tyler on fire management program.
Okay, thank you to the commission. My name's Tyler Briggs. I'm the fire management specialist and GIS specialist here at the Preserve, and I want to give you a brief update on what's going on with the fire program as we're about to kick off our 2014 season. Since our meeting in December, I've begun a project of converting our shape files into KMZ files, which is the forum that Google Earth uses. So I'm going to use Google Earth to show you what's going on with the fire program. What's great about using KMZ files in Google Earth is because it allows non-GIS users, people who don't have ESRI software, it gives them the ability to view the data. And Google Earth is free software, so anybody can download it. So all of you who are tied to my burn crew volunteer notification list, I'd encourage you to download Google Earth because it's free and it will give you an opportunity to see what we're doing this year. So in 2013, we prepared 450 acres and successfully burned 104 acres over 8 burns. 4 of them were successful, and the other 4 never made it out of test fire. But going forward, I can use this software to email and orient crew prior to them arriving at the scene. So, for example, I can zoom in on the Discovery Center here. I can upload attribute data to the file, so ahead of time, if we're going to burn management unit foulers, I can email this to the crew and they can zoom in, see the acceptable wind directions, fuel types, and this 3D building hasn't been developed statewide, but in urban areas it is. So if you zoom in, it actually renders individual trees, and you can see the terrain. Last year, which is really cool, so you can see the dunes and better orient yourself with the preserve. Let's see. Last year, burn crew volunteers and the burn bosses on contract had issues when we took them out to the burn units. They felt disoriented and sometimes were confused about what direction was what and what the terrain was like surrounding them. So using this, I can show people the elevation profile of fire breaks. They can see the slope and fuel types, and it's just a better tool to orient the crew. In addition, structural fire departments have invested in iPads for their engines. So using this, I can send them the KMZ files, and they can see access points, what breaks are drivable. And this is something I could share with, for example, Fort Hunter Fire Department in Guilderland, who responded to 2 wildfires on the preserve last year. Sending them this data allows them to view it on free software like Google Earth without having to download or purchase ESRI GIS software, which costs several $1,000s. Anyway, so when you get emails from me, I just wanted to show you that you can interact with it and basically orient yourself on what we're doing. I can also update you on management that's going on in the preserve if you're interested. And anyway, it's a really neat tool. This year, we have a permit to burn 900 acres of the preserve, which is an additional 5 from last year. Thanks to the efforts of Paul and Sam. I want to point out my 2 seasonals who I rehired last year, prepping the 450 acres. We'll take minimal work to get those ready to burn this year, and then hopefully with 13 budgeted burn days, we can hit our goal of 200 acres this year. I would also like to show you a flow chart of where I am in my training. Right now, I'm at this level as single resource boss, firing, and engine boss. I have 4 tasks left in firing and 10 in engine, on my path to become a RXB2, which is a national certification that allows you to legally burn in New York State in the pine bush. This past February, I got to go with TNC Burn Exchange in Texas and got 49 tasks signed off on the trip. So it's I want to thank TNC for allowing me to go on the trip, and the commission for allowing me to go on these out-of-state trips and work through my task books. Because it really was a great experience burning in different fuels, and I really learned a lot. These are some of the pictures from there. We burned a little over 3,000 acres in 4 days in southeast Texas, which is by Corpus Christi. Anyway, that was just short and brief. I wanted to give you a heads up of what we're doing. We just had on March 7th and 8th our annual fire refreshers, where we refreshed 37 people, all of whom are super eager and excited to burn at the Albany Pine Bush. We had people travel as far as Rochester to come here to our refresher because they're excited about the program.
So Tyler, your ultimate objective for this year is to burn roughly double what you did last year?
Yeah, 200 acres.
Okay, that's great.
And these are the units that we have slated to burn and that we've started to prepare.
You know, I'm very curious about these files. As an educator, it's always one of the stumbling blocks with working with students is this proprietary software, the skill level needed. Do you expect that these kind of files will be available to people to use in educational context? Do you plan to put them up or just distribute them personally? Because I think they'd be very valuable, not just in terms of implementing your fire plan, but also in terms of kind of incorporating some of this kind of reserve management into curricula and things.
I think it is, and this is something that we could share. I think Google is taking a bite out of ESRI's market, and you can convert your shape files, which are GIS files, to KMZ files with either a toolbar called XTools Pro or the Google Earth Pro software, where it's as simple as I can go import, I can navigate to a shape file, and I can bring it in, and then you can. So I've already brought that one in, so I won't do that. But then for like the burn unit, say I wanted to share it with you, I can just go email / select Outlook, and then I can send it to anybody. They can click on it if they've downloaded Google Earth, which is free. You can click and view and interact with the data on your own computer. So it's a really neat tool. So we can track management history, which is something that I've been doing, is converting these files into KMZ, and then it allows us to share it with basically anybody.
Might be in touch.
Yeah.
That sounds very exciting. Thanks.
Anybody?
I think it also goes to show the difficulties went down in corporate Christie area. You convert 3,000 acres in 4 days. I mean, that's literally the size of this entire reserve.
Yeah.
And here, because of the urban setting, you're looking at hopefully 200 acres, which is double. So I think it really goes to show the difficulty and the challenges that are faced, in this area. Tyler, are there other types of certifications that you get or that are available for burning in more urban areas versus the obviously more rural areas?
Could you repeat the question?
Are there different types of certifications that you earn for burning in more urban areas versus the rural areas?
Not certifications, but last year the commission sent me to take S215, which is Fire Operations in the Wildland Urban Interface, which was a class specifically on operating in and around structures in an urban phase that our preserve is in. Like you can see the close proximity to business and houses. This is over in Blueberry Hill, which makes burning it very difficult because smoke is our biggest concern. We can't smoke people out, so we have to be very cautious of the wind on any given day for a burn, and that makes burning very difficult. That's why we only had 4 successful days last year. Luckily we had good days and we could get a solid amount of acreage on them, but the reason why we're prepping so many different areas of the preserve is because weather changes here really frequently, and having numerous locations gives us the ability to choose a spot based on the weather conditions on that given day. Does anybody have any other questions about the software or the burn program? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler.
Our next presentation will be by Dr. Steve Kimball on the Carner Blue butterfly monitoring results.
Okay, well I think most of you here, and I know all of you over there, are at least somewhat familiar with the Carner Blue butterfly and the recovery efforts here at the preserve. So I'm only just going to provide sort of really cursory overview of those topics as a sort of a background. And then I just want to spend a little bit of time giving you an update on the results of our work from 2013. So this is just a reminder of what a typical life is like for the Carner Blue butterfly. The exit overwinter, hatch out around April. Those larvae then feed on lupin. They grow, they pupate, and then they emerge as adults around May. Those adults live probably on average for around 2 to 5 days. During that time, they mate and they lay eggs. Those eggs then develop, they hatch out as larvae, and then the second brood of adults emerge around July. Those adults then mate and lay eggs that overwinter, and that completes the annual life cycle for the species. So that gives rise to what's known as a bivoltine life cycle. That's just a fancy way of saying there's 2 generations per year. This is just a schematic of adult abundance over time. So this first hump here represents the first brood, and the second hump represents the second brood of adults. The butterfly has experienced a greater than 90% decline in abundance and distribution since the 1970s. This sort of yellowish area that you see here, this is historically where it used to occur.
now natural populations are limited to Wisconsin, Indiana, Michigan, and New York. And New York is considered the only natural population east of the Great Lakes because the New Hampshire population actually went extinct. However, it has since been started with captive individuals. And importantly, none of these populations are considered viable, meaning if nothing is done to help these species, they stand a high likelihood of going extinct. So to prevent the further decline of these species, it was given legal protection in 1977 by the DEC and listed as endangered in New York State, and then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listed as endangered across its range in 1992. Now when a species is listed as endangered, a recovery plan needs to be developed, and the recovery plan outlines actions that need to be taken to recover the species. And also in that recovery plan, there are criteria by which recovery will be measured. And so for the federal recovery criteria, they're calling for one or more viable populations in all 13 of these recovery units. So each of these stippled areas are recovery units. And so for the federal recovery criteria, they want one or more viable populations in all 13 of those. And the Glacier Lake Albany recovery unit where we are, they're calling for 3 viable populations. So now if we look at that a little bit closer here, this is the Glacier Lake Albany recovery unit. And within that, there's 4 state recovery units: Queensbury, Saratoga West, Saratoga Sand Plains, and the Albany Pine Bush. So the federal recovery are looking for at least viable populations in 3 of these 4 state recovery units. And in order to be considered recovered within the state, the DEC is requiring viable populations in all 4 of those recovery units. And I keep saying viable population. A viable population, that's defined as, in both federal and state recovery criteria, as at least 3,000 individuals in the first or second brood in 4 out of 5 years. Okay, so that's just a little bit of background on the biology and conservation status. Now I just want to go a little bit, talk a little bit about our recovery efforts. Again, I'm keeping it real brief. As you all know, the preserve is in a highly urbanized area. As you can see here, and much of the preserve is actually not in high quality butterfly habitat. Years of fire suppression has led to the incursion of surrounding forest trees, so we have a lot of aspen and white pine that came in over the years. And then we also have areas that have been overrun by non-native species, and particularly black locust is one of the bigger problem species. So this is just one example of how we go about restoring butterfly habitat. And this is sort of the most dramatic example. This is a black locust stand. The understory is completely changed. This is completely unsuitable for carnival butterflies. So we decided the best way to deal with the black locust is its complete removal. So they cut all the black locust down. We leave any remaining pitch pines or oaks that may have been hanging on within the canopy of the black locust. But we cut the black locust down, remove the logs, we rip up the stumps, and then we bury the stumps. And essentially we're starting from scratch. So we're done here. So then we come in and we plant those areas with native vegetation, and within that, of course, are lupin, which the butterfly needs, as well as other nectar species. And then hopefully after a few years of growth, we get something like this. Now, once we restore those areas, we also want to reintroduce the processes that are going to help maintain those areas and those conditions. And historically, one of the main processes that has done that has been fire. So as Tyler just mentioned, we are bringing fire back into the preserve through prescribed burns. By burning, we help keep these areas open. We help keep the forest from overtaking these areas. Now, once we restore these areas, the butterflies don't show up there, at least not right away. And in some of these areas that we restore, these patches are sort of distant from some of the patches where the butterflies already occur. So we want to sort of help this process along a little bit, so it happens a little bit faster, and we do that by accelerating the colonization of these patches, and we do that through captive rearing and release. So we collect gravid females here in the preserve. We give those females to New Hampshire Department of Fish and Game. They then care for those females. They take the eggs, they rear the eggs and the larvae, and then they give them back to us as pupae. And then when those pupae are ready to eclose, we put them in these butterfly tents with some nectar sources, and then soon after they eclose, which means they emerge from their pupae, we go out and put them out to the restored sites. And so this is just to give you an effort, a summary of our efforts to date. So far, we've released about 5,600 butterflies into restored areas. And this green box I have here is just to denote, prior to 2011, is what we were doing here. Prior to 2011, we were actually taking these pupae and we were putting them into these sort of contraptions out of the restored patches and letting them emerge on site. That worked well in years like 2009 when conditions were good. However, 2008 and 2010 were very hot, and a lot of the pupae ended up dying out there. So starting in 2011, we moved the whole operation indoors, and I think you can see we've had a pretty high success rate in terms of taking those pupae and turning them into adults that we can then release. All right, I know that was really brief, but hopefully I've given you some idea that we are putting a lot of effort into recovering these species. So we want to know, given that we're putting this much effort in, are our recovery efforts working? In other words, is the population size in the preserve increasing? And if so, how are we doing relative to the recovery criteria, the state and federal recovery criteria, which remember, we're looking for greater than 3,000 individuals in either brood in 4 out of 5 years. So we need to monitor the population. Specifically, we need to monitor brood size. And brood size is just the cumulative number of adults that have emerged within a flight period. So the flight period is when the first butterfly emerged for that brood, and then up until when the last butterfly of that brood has died. So now I'm going to spare you, I gave you a lot more of the details of how we go about estimating brood size last year. I'm going to spare you many of those details. And just as a reminder, I'm just going to kind of give you right now sort of the conceptual approach to how we go about estimating brood size. Certainly, if you want to talk about those details, I'm happy to afterwards, but I'm going to spare those details for you guys right now. But I did want to say, like I said, conceptually sort of remind you how we go about getting to brood sizes. So we start with raw counts, which we gather by distance sampling, and that just means we're out there walking along transects in the preserve, counting the number of butterflies that we see, and also noting how far the butterflies are from the transect. Now we get from these raw counts, which these are the raw counts from each of the different survey periods, we get from there to abundance estimates by accounting for imperfect detection. And what I mean by imperfect detection is when we're out there walking on those transects, we know we're not seeing all the butterflies out there. We're seeing all the ones on the line, but the butterflies, as they get farther and farther from the line, they're harder to see. And so we know that our ability to detect butterflies decreases with distance from the line. And so using distance sampling methods and a software package that helps us account for that, what we can do is we can see how many butterflies are we seeing and how many are we missing. And then we can use the ratio of those numbers to basically adjust our raw counts to get abundance estimates. So now we have, at this point, we have abundance estimates for each of the different survey periods. So now we get from those abundance estimates to brood size by fitting an insect population curve. So this insect population curve is essentially a model that's controlled by a whole bunch of different parameters, and one of those parameters is brood size. And so remember, brood size is the number of adults that have emerged over this entire period. So by fitting this, and again, I'm being very sort of coarse in my description, but in fitting this curve and fitting this model to these data, and brood size being one of the parameters that controls the shape, essentially, of that curve, by fitting the best curve to this data, then we get our best estimate of brood size. All right. So what did we find? Well, the first thing I want you to note here is this is the amount of area that we've surveyed since 2007. And you can see that the amount of area that we surveyed is increased. And that simply reflects our restoration efforts. So as we restore these areas and release butterflies into those areas, we work those areas into our survey efforts. And so what you're seeing here is this reflects the increase in restoration efforts. And last year we surveyed about 35 hectares. So I don't know what is that in acres. It's about 70, yeah, it's about 100 acres, if you care about that. But I'm a scientist, so I talk in hectares. So we surveyed about 35 hectares, and we were actually, that's essentially, I think we're sort of maxed out at capacity. I think, given our current crew size, I think 35 hectares is about probably as much as we can survey of the preserve in a given year. Okay, so now I want to overlay the brood sizes. Again, a couple things I want you to see here. First, you'll notice there's a lot of fluctuation from year to year. That's to be expected in insect populations. But something else here is now that we're starting to get a longer time series, it looks like we're seeing an increasing trend in butterfly numbers, which would suggest that it seems then that it would appear that our recovery efforts seem to be working. And remember, the recovery threshold was 3,000. So in 2012, the second brood exceeded the recovery threshold for the first time since we started doing distance sampling in 2007. And then in 2013, it was probably also over the recovery threshold as well. Now I say probably because these are just estimates, and of course there's uncertainty associated with these estimates, and the uncertainty is very hard to quantify. So I'm still working on that. But there will be sort of some uncertainty around each of these estimates, so I'll feel better when I put confidence intervals on these estimates and the lower bounds of the confidence intervals are above the recovery thresholds. Then I'll say, like, if the full range is above the recovery threshold, then we're probably, it's probably safe to say that we've exceeded the recovery threshold. So, like I said, it looks like we are exceeding the recovery threshold. Sort of as further evidence to suggest that we are above that recovery threshold is the fact that where we're doing distance sampling is not all the sites where we know butterflies occur. In 2013, we did occupancy surveys at 28 other sites, and an occupancy survey for this year, that meant at the peak of the second brood in 2013, we went out about 3 different occasions, I think, and looked to see if we could find adult butterflies flying in these other sites. And so we actually found them in 11 out of the 28 sites. So we know there's more butterflies out there than we use to estimate brood size. So that gives further evidence to suggest that we probably are over that recovery threshold. And something else I wanted to touch on is this, which I'm sort of clunky, but I'm calling biologically versus legally occupied. Neil actually wanted me to talk about this, but it's sort of interesting. It is. So these blue, this is a combination of what we see here is a combination of the distance sampling and the occupancy surveys from 2013. So these blue areas are areas that we surveyed and that we found butterflies at. The red areas are where we looked and didn't find them. So I'm calling these sort of blue areas, these are sort of, for lack of a better term, biologically occupied. We went out, we looked for butterflies, and we found them there. Now, when you come to the regulatory definition of occupied or unoccupied, the regulatory or the legal definition, any patch of lupin or any patch of habitat that is within 200 meters of an occupied patch is also considered occupied. So even though we didn't see butterflies at these patches, based on their proximity, under the law, those are also considered legally occupied. And then if we expand that out a little bit more, there are still other patches of that have been planted with lupin in the past that are either separate patches or parts of patches that we didn't survey the entire patches of. All of those are also within 200 meters of the occupied patches. So those are legally considered occupied. So even though in 2013 we only saw butterflies in 60 hectares, really all of these areas are considered occupied by Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's actually about, I think, 150 hectares. So 375 acres of legally occupied habitat. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that I am working with Kathy O'Brien. I'm helping her estimate their brood sizes at the Saratoga Sand Plains and Saratoga West Recovery Units. She has right now just a couple years of data, but as we start getting more and more data, we can start to look at the trends there to see how their recovery efforts are working. But I did want to mention that I am helping her with her estimates. But I didn't want to leave you with that. I did want to leave you with what's going on here. So this is just a reminder that what we're seeing here does look promising. It does look like we're seeing an increasing trend. We have had in the last 2 years, the second brood has exceeded the recovery threshold. Of course, like I said, insect populations do fluctuate a lot, so we still need to keep track of this. We can't say we're out of the woods just yet, but certainly it looks promising, and it looks like our recovery efforts are paying off. So I'm happy to take any questions.
When Steve mentioned Kathy O'Brien, do people know who Kathy O'Brien is? Kathy's the endangered species biologist for DEC. Okay, just making sure. Yes.
Steve, do you think the spike in 2013 might be related to the 2012, there was what? Was it 2012, there were 3 broods? Is there a
There was not a third brood, really. I think there were some individuals that appeared late, but it certainly wasn't a population level response. I mean, I think we saw a few individuals that would come out when a third brood would be, but I would not call that a third brood. But no, I think it could have been just a really good year, and insect populations can sort of be explosive. If they're really good, you're going to have a high survival, and they're just going to sort of go nuts. And you can see just from the first brood to the second brood, just how those eggs that were laid by the first brood, you can see just how much of a jump there was just within that summer. But these things can jump. They can be sort of this eruptive population growth. So whether or not this is just sort of an eruption because conditions are really good and it'll come back down to something else, I think it sort of remains to be seen. But as we get a longer time series, we can start to get an idea of how much these populations actually fluctuate versus what's noise versus what's an actual sort of signal of an increase.
In terms of the recovery plan, what's the, how do we know when we are out of the woods? Is there a definition of how many years it has to be above 3,000?
4 out of 5, I think they said, and with the 5th year, you have to be above in the 5th year. So I think it's sort of a crude attempt to account for the fact that butterfly populations fluctuate, but if you're then you're probably okay. So I think they're sort of trying to account for the variability in those numbers, and there are some other criteria about connectivity between the different patches and all that other stuff, but I just presented the numeric criteria. Yes?
Who do you have, do you have non-scientists counting? Is citizen science employed in this effort at all?
We have primarily college students and college graduates. So they're typically people within the field that are helping that. So we require some field knowledge. But really we need citizen science I think would be hard to do in this sort of thing because we need very reliable and sort of on short notice to say the weather's good, we got to get out there and count now. So certainly the methods we're doing, I think they can be trained on that, but typically with availability, with availability being what it is, it's sort of hard to rely on volunteers to sort of reliably get out and do that sort of stuff. But the on-the-ground methods are not overly complicated if they can identify a Karner blue butterfly and if they can basically estimate its distance from the transects is really all it comes down to, and then dealing with a lot of briars and ticks and things. Anything else? Great, thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, I just scheduled.
Next thing we have on our agenda is an executive session. So
We need a motion, and I need to identify, we're going into executive session to talk about personnel matters.
Make a motion, we go into executive session.
second motion?
all in favor of moving to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, we will move to executive session.